So hi guys and welcome back. So the chapter we'll be studying today is Kingdom Plantae or the plant kingdom. So in our previous chapter, that is biological classification, we've seen that all living organisms on this planet Earth are divided into 5 major kingdoms. What are they? Quick recap. We have kingdom Monera, then we have kingdom Protista, then all the fungi are included in kingdom Fungi, and finally the comparatively advanced kingdoms, that is kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia. So today we will be learning about kingdom Plantae. So initially scientists thought that the criteria for any organism to be included in kingdom Plantae was that it should have a cell wall. But did this criteria work for all the organisms? Now we know that a lot of protists or a lot of monerans, or for that matter even fungi, have some or the other kind of cell wall. But these are very distinct from plants because the basic characteristic of plant is different, that is the ability to synthesize their own food is absent in these. So the criteria to include animals or organisms into kingdom Plantae have been changed. To understand what organisms are included in kingdom Plantae, how we classify those organisms inside kingdom Plantae, and what are the different characteristics of various classes, let's start studying about kingdom Plantae. So going on to page number 1 of our notes. Yes. So kingdom Plantae. We have discussed 3 kingdoms in our previous chapter, that is Monera, Protista and Fungi. So coming to the 4th kingdom, that is kingdom Plantae. But what is the criteria for organisms to be considered a plant? Like I told you, one is the presence of a cell wall and second is the ability to synthesize their own food using photosynthesis, therefore it should have photopigments. So why aren't the other organisms who have a cell wall like protists or fungi who were previously included in this kingdom are now excluded? Like I told you, the ability to photosynthesize is absent in most of them. To understand the criteria involved, we will first understand how our classification system has been modified over the years. So now we've understood that having a cell wall is not the sole criteria. We need the ability to photosynthesize as well. See, all the organisms which had these abilities were included in kingdom Plantae, and to later make finer classification, there were a few criteria given by scientists over the years. Let's see about them. So going on to the first criteria or first classification system, it was the artificial classification system. Okay, so are artificial stuff good? No, right? So this is also an obsolete system, यानी कि इसको अभी यूज़ नहीं किया जाता. क्यों? Because here plants were classified on the basis of one or few morphological characters. हम चाहते हैं क्या कि प्लांट थोड़े से मॉर्फोलॉजिकल कैरेक्टर्स पे ऊपर क्लासीफाई हो? नहीं ना. दैट इज़ वाई दिस क्लासिफिकेशन सिस्टम वॉज नाउ बीन डिस्कार्डेड. इट्स नॉट यूज्ड एनी मोर. क्लासिफिकेशन सिस्टम आर्टिफिशियल क्लासिफिकेशन सिस्टम वॉज गिवन बाय लिनियस. ठीक है, दिस सिस्टम वॉज गिवन बाय लिनियस, द आर्टिफिशियल क्लासिफिकेशन सिस्टम. ओके, हियर देयर वाज इक्वल वेटेज गिवन टू बोथ वेजिटेटिव and reproductive characters. अभी मुझे बताओ what is the importance of these two terms, vegetative characters and reproductive characters. This is a very slight concept I need you guys to understand. जो हमारे vegetative characters है, those include what? The external appearance of the plant like leaves or their shoot system, root system, flowers. And the reproductive characters include its life cycle, the characteristics of its reproductive cycle, that is division, number of seeds, etc. The number of the number of pistils or stamens on a flower, all these are included in the reproductive characters. Now tell me guys, which amongst the two do you think are more reliable for classification? The answer to this is reproductive characters. Vegetative characters like leaves, shoots, flowers, these have a tendency to change over time in the same plant, and there can also be variation amongst different plants of the same species. Does that mean कि वो अलग species के हैं? नहीं. So that is why this system is not used, or this vegetative characters have less importance when we are about to classify plants. So that is why the artificial classification, which gave equal weightage to both of them, was obsolete. The next type of classification system we had was the natural classification system. Now, like the name suggests, natural better than artificial. So this system was a little more better. Plants were classified on the basis of complete gross morphology. That is, they considered all the characteristics of the plant, not just one or few characters. Also, more weightage was given to reproductive characters. That is why this system is better than the artificial system. Which system is this? This is the natural classification system. Okay. So, going on to the next type of classification system, that is the natural phylogenetic classification system. Now, this has got two terms. First is natural, therefore, it is very similar to natural characteristic classification system, in which the entire gross morphology is considered and more weightage is given to reproductive characters. And it also has the second word, that is phylogenetic. अब इसका क्या मतलब है? Phylogenetic यानी evolutionary sequence से related या फिर it relates to the evolution of the organism. So इसीलिए along with various internal and external characters, evolutionary relationships between the organisms is also considered. तो इसके अंदर नया क्या है? It considers the evolutionary relationships or evolutionary status of the organism also. That is why this is the most accepted classification, because it gives more weightage to reproductive characters, considers the entire gross morphology, and also has focus on the evolutionary relationships. Okay. So these were the three main type of classification systems. Now apart from these, we had some secondary classification systems as well. These are not primary, like we have to classify animals using the natural phylogenetic system of classification, but to aid that we have some secondary classification systems as well. So what are some examples? The first is the numerical classification system. अभी numerical यानी क्या? यानी numbers. So we are comparing or using numbers to analyze or classify. What number? The number of similarities and dissimilarities using computers. Okay. So basically in a computer all the similarities and dissimilarities are fed. So now the computer analyzes which characteristics match and which characteristics don't match. So it gives us a detailed analysis of similarities and dissimilarities between two given organisms, therefore ordering them in the number of giving them an order of closeness, that is which of them are closely related and which are comparatively distantly related, and that helps us classify the organisms. So this was numerical classification. Going on to the next secondary type, that is chemotaxonomy. Now like the name suggests, कीमो यानी केमिकल्स के यूज़ से हम टैक्सोनॉमी यानी कि क्लासीफाई करते हैं. सो इसमें क्या करते हैं? यूज़ ऑफ केमिकल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ प्लांट्स इज यूज्ड इन सॉल्विंग टैक्सोनॉमिकल प्रॉब्लम्स. सो व्हाट कैन बी द केमिकल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स? इट कुड बी थिंग्स लाइक द नेक्टर that the plant produces. It could be characteristics of certain enzymes produced by that plant, or rather the juice in its fruits, etc. So if these chemical constitution of two similar compounds is same, therefore it tells us that these two plants are closely related, or rather the same species. So these chemical characteristics have been used to classify plants, and this is called as chemotaxonomy. Okay. So going on to the third secondary type of classification, that is cytotaxonomy. Now the word cyto मतलब सेल, तो हम सेल के बेसिस पर क्लासीफाई कर रहे हैं. तो कैसे क्लासीफाई करते हैं? वी यूज साइटोलॉजिकल कैरेक्टर्स लाइक क्रोमोसोम नंबर, क्रोमोसोम बिहेवियर, morphology, etc. to classify the plants. So this was the three secondary type of classification systems. कौन से थे? A quick revision. We had the numerical system in which we compared the number of similarities and dissimilarities. Then we had the chemotaxonomy system, in which we considered chemical characteristics. And finally, we had the cytotaxonomy, which considered cytological characters like chromosome number, chromosome behavior and chromosome morphology. So now that we know how the plants have been classified, let's see the classification of kingdom Plantae in detail. Like, let's look at the actual classes made in the kingdom Plantae. Okay. So here I have this nice flow chart which gives us a brief idea of the different divisions of kingdom Plantae. Okay. Yes. So kingdom Plantae has been divided into 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. 5 major classes. What are they? They are the most basic ones, that is Algae, which includes again 3 subclasses, that is Chlorophyceae, Phaeophyceae and Rhodophyceae. Chlorophyceae is green algae, Phaeophyceae is brown algae and Rhodophyceae is red algae. The next category is Bryophytes. Bryophytes, also called as the amphibians of the plant kingdom. Why and why are they called this name? I will tell you in a short while. The Bryophytes again have 3 subtypes, that is Hepatocopsida, Anthecerotopsida and Bryopsia, which are basically liverworts, hornworts and mosses. Bryopsia is mosses. Okay. The next category is Pteridophytes. अभी Pteridophytes कौन से types के हैं? We have Coelopsida, Lycopsida, Sphenopsida and Pteropsida. Then come the gymnosperms. Okay. These gymnosperms include Cycadophyta and Coniferophyta. Coniferophyta are the higher gymnosperms and Cycadophyta are the lower gymnosperms, which include cycads, etc. The next category is angiosperms, which are nothing but are modern flowering plants, which are most of the species we see around us, like hibiscus, rose, etc. Okay. So moving on to the first class, that is Algae. So today we will learn about the general characteristics of class Algae. Yes. So going on to Algae. So what are the basic characteristics of Algae? How do we say कि ये particular plant algae में डालेंगे? So a few basic characteristics are they are chlorophyll bearing, of course, they are photoautotrophic and they are found in fresh water, brackish water, marine water. So basically in most of the kinds of water algae are found. This tells us that algae do not live on land, they need water for their survival. Okay, point noted. Next is that cell wall is made up of cellulose, pectin, galactin and mannans. But most importantly, this is made of cellulose and a little form of pectin. Okay. These two things you need to remember, that the cell wall is made up of cellulose and pectin primarily and also galactin and mannans in other subclasses. Okay. So their body structure. Now their body structure is given a particular term called thalloid structure. Thalloid यानी क्या? Thalloid is thelly, that is bag like. Okay. Thalloid यानी bag like. Why is it called bag like? Bag क्योंकि once you keep a bag on the table, can you without looking at its handle say which is the top part, which is the lower part, which is the right part or the left part? No, a bag can be shifted anyways, right? So there is no differentiation into the root system or the stem or the leaves. Therefore tissue systemation is absent, that is the plant cells are not divided into certain tissues. All of them are diffusely distributed similar cells and there is no differentiation between roots, stems or leaves of any kind. Okay. So talking about reproduction, it is a very important part because we saw earlier that reproductive characters are of primary importance when it comes to classification. So अभी reproduction कौन से 3 टाइप के होते हैं? इसमें reproduction होता है vegetative type, sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Okay. So vegetative type is something that does not involve the formation of spores, etc. So we have 2 important methods, that is binary fission and fragmentation. Binary fission, like we have seen in kingdom Monera in bacteria, this happens in unicellular algae, because binary fission में क्या होता है, one cell, a mother cell, literally divides into two daughter cells with the same number of chromosomes. It is just simple division which helps in making two cells from one cell. That is binary division. We have learned about the details in kingdom Monera. Next is fragmentation. Fragmentation occurs usually in the filamentous algae. Why? Because if this is a filament, if I break it from here, this part and this part has the ability to reproduce or form an individual algae of its own. Okay. The next we need to see is asexual reproduction. Now, asexual reproduction involves the formation of spores without the meeting or involvement of two different algae. So, basically we have spores like zoospore, aplanospore, hypnospores and acinids. Okay. So, these asexual spores can be formed by the individual plant as well. You do not need a partner plant or a second plant for it. That is why this mode is called as asexual reproduction. Okay. Remember the name of the spores: zoospore, aplanospore, hypnospore and acinids. And finally, the most complex type of reproduction, that is sexual reproduction. So, let us look at the details of the sexual reproduction. So, we see that in algae, sexual reproduction can be of three types. So, these three types depend upon the type of gamete formed. We know that for sexual reproduction to occur, we need one male gamete, just a second, we need one male gamete and one female gamete, right. So, if the male and the female gamete are exactly the same, you call it isogamous. Okay, it is called as isogamous type of sexual reproduction. Now, if the male gamete and the female gamete are different or a little bit different than each other, then we can say, or their type of cilia or their flagella are different, then we call it anisogamous. Okay. And if the male and the female gamete are so drastically different that the male gamete is very small and the female gamete is very huge compared to the male gamete, the female gamete is given a special name, that is oogamete. Okay. I will write OOG here for oogamete, and this type of sexual reproduction is called as oogamy or oogamous type of sexual reproduction. Okay. So, going on to the important details about these. Okay. I will draw this again. So, in isogamous type, we have both similar looking gametes. Okay. This is seen in simple versions like Cladophora, Velothrix, Ectocarpus, Spirogyra and Chlamydomonas dibariminum. Okay. Isogamous यानी कि same gametes, iso यानी same और gamous यानी gametes. ठीक है. The next category is anisogamous. अभी anisogamous में क्या होता है? Aniso यानी different और gametes यानी कि gametes. So, इसमें शायद there is a few different characteristics. For example, एक थोड़ा बड़ा, एक थोड़ा छोटा, या फिर it depends on the number of flagella as well. This might have 2 flagella or 1 flagella, etc. So, this is seen in Chlamydomonas browni. Okay. The third type is oogamous type of sexual reproduction. Like I told you, इसमें female gamete is called oogamete, which is one big immotile gamete which has lot of stored food, and it is called as oogamete. And the male gamete is comparatively very small and usually motile. Okay. So, this is oogamous type of sexual reproduction seen in Chlamydomonas coccifera, sargassum, volvox and fucus. Okay. So, quick revision: isogamous is seen in Cladophora, Velothrix, Ectocarpus, Spirogyra and Chlamydomonas dibariminum. Okay. And anisogamous examples is Chlamydomonas browni. Oogamous examples are the comparatively more advanced algae like Chlamydomonas coccifera, sargassum, volvox and fucus. ठीक है. So sex organs of algae are unicellular and non-jacketed. In most algae, because they are such simple basic forms, the sex organs are unicellular and non-jacketed. But there is an exception, and this is Shara. Shara has multicellular and jacketed sex organs. Okay, that is why it is different or an exception. Next, the plant body of algae is haploid. ठीक है, haploid यानी क्या? It has n number of cells. Rather, अपनी जो बॉडी है, हमारे जो सेल्स है वो डिप्लॉयड है, यानी एक क्रोमोसोम सेट की 2 कॉपीज है, यानी हम लोग 2n होते हैं, दैट इज डिप्लॉयड. बट एल्गी की प्लांट बॉडी हैप्लॉयड है, यानी कि उसमें सिर्फ एक कॉपी है, n नंबर ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स. सो रिप्रोडक्शन टेक्स प्लेस थ्रू जाइगोटिक मियोसिस. इसका क्या मतलब है? जाइगोटिक मियोसिस का ये मतलब है कि जो जाइगोट है, जो बनता है आफ्टर द फ्यूजन ऑफ 2 गमीट्स, दैट इज गोइंग टू अंडरगो मियोसिस, यानी इसके नंबर ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स हाफ होंगे. Why? Just give me a second, I'll explain it to you in a very nice diagram. And this life cycle is called haplontic. क्यों? कि body of the algae is haploid. ठीक है, but इधर भी एक exception है. क्या? Brown algae. ठीक है, so इसमें क्या exception है? Brown algae are diploid, यानी कि उनके body में 2n number of chromosomes है. ठीक है, Therefore, gametic meiosis occurs. इसका क्या मतलब है? गमीट हमें पता है कि n नंबर ऑफ क्रोमोसोम से होते हैं, तो गमीट बनाने के लिए सेल को मियोसिस अंडरगो करना पड़ेगा, इसीलिए इसको कहते हैं गमीटिक मियोसिस. ठीक है, ये होता है ब्राउन एल्गे में. ठीक है, ब्राउन एल्गे अंडरगो गमीटिक मियोसिस. दिस इज कॉल्ड डिप्लोहैप्लॉन्टिक लाइफ साइकिल. डिप्लोहैप्लॉन्टिक क्यों? क्योंकि अडल्ट बॉडी डिप्लॉयड है और गमीट्स हैप्लॉयड है, तो डिप्लोहैप्लॉन्टिक लाइफ साइकिल. ठीक है, और हमारे नॉर्मल एल्गे में हैप्लॉन्टिक लाइफ साइकिल. क्लियर? सो हियर इन एल्गे द एम्ब्रियो इज नॉट फॉर्म. अभी डायरेक्टली अगर n या फिर 2n नंबर ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स वाला एक सेल बन जाता है जाइगोट, दैट इटसेल्फ इज एन अडल्ट, और दैट इटसेल्फ कैन फंक्शन एज एन अडल्ट और इंडिविजुअल. व्हाई? बिकॉज there is no requirement to increase the number of cells because there is no tissue differentiation as such. इसीलिए embryo is not required and not formed in algae. ठीक है, so going on to 2 charts which are very beautifully explain the haplontic and the haplodiplontic life cycle. So this is the case of zygotic meiosis, जिसके अंदर zygote 2n से n बनाता है मियोसिस करके. अभी वो क्यों बनाएगा n? क्योंकि अडल्ट हैप्लॉयड होगा, तो सही है, इसमें अडल्ट हैप्लॉयड है, यानी इसमें n नंबर ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स है. अभी वो अंडरगो करेगा माइटोसिस. क्यों? क्योंकि गमीज को n ही तो चाहिए, सो सेम नंबर ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स आने के लिए माइटोसिस करेगा एंड विल हैव 2n वाले गमीज. अभी गमीज n वाले फर्टिलाइज करके बनाएंगे जाइगोट 2n नंबर ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स के साथ. Now we don't need 2n chromosome, right? So we have to cut it to half. इसीलिए meiosis करके it will form an adult. Okay? So zygote का meiosis होता है, इसीलिए this is zygotic meiosis. ठीक है? And this type of life cycle is haplontic life cycle, क्योंकि adult में n number of chromosomes है. ठीक है? The next one here is the adult has 2n number of chromosomes. इसका बेस्ट एग्जाम्पल क्या है? ब्राउन एल्गे. ठीक है, हमने अभी देखा था कि ब्राउन एल्गे में डिप्लोहैप्लॉन्टिक या फिर डिप्लॉयड लाइफ साइकिल है. ठीक है, तो अडल्ट में 2n नंबर ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स है और हमें n वाले गमीट्स बनाने, तो क्या करेंगे? मियोसिस, दैट इज हाफ में डिवाइड करेंगे. सो देर इज गमीटिक मियोसिस. ठीक है, अभी जाहिर सी बात है, अगर फर्टिलाइजेशन के बाद 2n वाला जाइगोट बनता है तो अडल्ट में भी तो हमें 2n चाहिए ना, सो देर विल बी नो काइंड ऑफ डिविजन एट ऑल, सो इट विल डायरेक्टली फॉर्म द अडल्ट. सो दिस इज सीन इन ब्राउन एल्गे. ओके, सो हियर आर अ फ्यू important points we need to understand. First is that at least half of the total fixation of CO2 on earth is carried out by algae. तो हमारी अर्थ पे more than at least half of the total fixation of CO2 is done by algae. We've seen in photosynthesis, right, that CO2 is utilized to form food. So these algae contribute to clearing half of the CO2 in the atmosphere. Next, that they increase the level of oxygen in their immediate environment. Obviously, through photosynthesis itself, we have seen that they give out oxygen during photosynthesis. That is why increase the level of oxygen. Okay. Next important thing about algae is its commercial use in the form of hydrocolloids or phycocolloids. Okay. So ये colloid क्या है? These colloid substances which are obtained from algae are very high water holding capacity substances. ठीक है, इनमें बहुत पानी होल्ड करके रखने की कैपेसिटी है. What are the examples? We have substances like algin, carrageen and agar-agar. इनकी स्पेशलिटी क्या है? These are used commercially in food products like ice creams, jellies, etc. That is why there is commercial demand for hydrocolloids or phycocolloids. ठीक है. And lastly, something called as pyrenoids. Now, what are pyrenoids? They are the storage bodies in the chloroplasts. They store proteins and starch. Pyrenoids are storage bodies in algae chloroplast which store proteins and starch. So this was the basic general characteristics about algae. ठीक है. So हमने क्या क्या सीखा? हमने सीखा कि algae के body structure कैसा है? Thalloid. We've learnt about the different kinds of algae in what all areas they can be found. We've seen about the life cycle or the reproductive cycle of the algae, that is vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. So in the next class, we'll go on to learn the different subclasses of algae. Okay, bye.